All right, we are a little bit past 7 o'clock. Good evening or afternoon if you're joining us from the West Coast. My name is Madison Carter. I am the NABJ secretary. I'm also an investigative journalist for Tegna. I will be moderating this incredible panel we have for you tonight. I know an hour is not going to be enough time, but it's all we got. So I really want to get underway, but first let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. This is the Infiltrate the I-Team panel. This is helping young or even mid-career journalists really take your career to the next level. And all of us like to consider that next level investigative journalism. We have some incredible people here. We have Zanetta Lowe, Randy Mack, Curtis Macleod, Darlene Jones, but we are very blessed to have one of my favorite investigators on this panel, and she just happens to be our NABJ president. So I would love if our president, Dorothy Tucker, if you don't mind, we'd love to just hear a few words from you before we get started, just about the importance of this panel and how we can really move our industry forward in this direction, getting more journalists into the space. If you could just unmute before we get...
that would work. I only do this for a living. Thank you, Madison, and thank you, Curtis. Curtis came to me, I guess, a few weeks ago with the idea, and I immediately connected him with Madison, and it has taken off. And I am so very grateful to the two of you for taking on this project, because it is definitely something near and dear to my heart. I've had the opportunity to do investigative reporting probably the last 15 or so years on a part-time basis, but the last 4 years, I would say, I have been a full-time investigator, and it really has been, it's been amazing. I am definitely living my best life because of the stories that I am able to devote full time to and cover those stories. If you will notice, and it is no secret, that the majority of the investigative teams, whether it is print, broadcast, or digital, the majority of them are led and mostly manned by white men. And then every now and then you will see these white women as well. But for the most part, they are not, you don't see very many of us. And my mission, our mission, is to change that. I really want to focus more on investigative panels and workshops. This is why we are starting this one. You are going to see much more of this. We are going to start an I-Team task force so we can hear from you, because the jobs are out there, and we want to encourage all of our members who are interested to please learn the skills. As a matter of fact, today, literally just about 2 hours ago, I got an email from someone at the Root, one of the senior VPs at the Root. They just got funding and they are looking for an investigative reporter. I'm going to find that link and put it in the chat in a few minutes, but it is probably one of the many that I periodically get. So again, this is something that we definitely need to do, and I'm 100% behind. Madison and Curtis, thank you again. Really and the rest of the panelists, thank you also for joining us. We couldn't do this without you.
Dorothy is a wealth of knowledge. I really hope that you will be able to stick around and jump in on some of these questions. If not, we understand you are very busy. A little bit more housekeeping off the top. There are going to be so many questions I know from all of you as they come up. We'd love it if you could use the Q&A box for that. I know the chat's there, but please use the Q&A. That way we can track, make sure we're answering those questions. All right, want to introduce you to our panelists now. We're going to go in order. This whole entire panel is about how to move into the I-Team. So instead of going down the bio, I want to ask you all a unique question. I want to know why you got into investigation. So if you give us your name, you give us where you're working, and then tell us why you got into investigations. Zanetta, I'd love to start with you. You could just unmute. We're ready to go.
Hello, thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be in you all's company. I am in Memphis, Tennessee. I've been here for the last 10 years, and I got into investigations in a market before that, actually, where I met Curtis in Columbus, Georgia. So I'd say the last 15, 16 or so years of my career, I've spent as an investigative reporter and primarily as a consumer investigative reporter. But I got into it, I actually sort of fell into it because I was interested in long form reporting prior to that. Spent a little bit of time out of the business. I'm married to a football coach and athletic director, and we moved around a good bit early on in our marriage. And so got out of the business for a little while, got back into the business in a smaller market, And I pitched a couple of ideas about, beats and things I could do. And they said, what we're really looking for is, our research shows people are interested in scams, ripoffs, how to protect themselves, how to save money. Can you do it? And I said, absolutely. And we launched a consumer investigative unit. And I know that was like the answer to another question you might have asked, but that's the real answer to my how I sort of started. I tried to do it a little early on. I didn't know how to ask or what to call it much younger. I just knew I wanted to go deeper into the everyday stories. And then as time would tell and years later, an opportunity presented itself.
We're definitely going to get into a lot of that, how a lot of people fall into it or just sneak into it. And what do you call this? Oh, now I'm an investigator. Zanetta, it's so great to hear from you. Really excited to have you on the panel. Another consumer investigator that a lot of you might know is Mr. Randy Mack in LA. So same question for you. Tell us, I told everybody where you work, I'm sorry. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been there and then why you moved into investigations.
Yeah, I've been a reporter for 31 years. So these gray hairs are earned. I'm old. But for 25 of those years, I was basically a general assignment reporter who was an A-block story breaker. And a lot of those stories organically sort of became investigative stories. And so I kind of morphed into it. But the way I kind of fell into it 8 years ago and got hired here was that the position of a consumer reporter was basically made for me by the former news director. I happened to be at NABJ and I was doing some coaching at the NBC booth of a young woman who had brought a tape there, and she, like a lot of women, wanted to be on the red carpet. She wanted to be the next Sean Robinson. And so when I started asking her about herself, she told me she had an MBA. And I said, why do you want to be on the red carpet if you have an MBA? If you could be the only Black woman here who could speak to business issues and make them easy to explain to people, but you want to compete for the one job that 2,000 other women here are competing for. While I was telling her that, the news director here in Los Angeles was sitting over my shoulder watching me coach and watching me, talk to her. And then he came up to me afterwards and said, hey, that was absolutely great advice, because if I found that woman here, I would hire her in a minute, and create a franchise. What I didn't know at the time is that he was thinking about creating a franchise around me. It just took 7 years before he was able to hire me. And so he brought me here to Los Angeles, and I've been doing exactly what Zanetta's doing consumer investigative reports, trying to put money back in people's pockets. And it's been a great 8 years. I'm give it several millions of dollars. I mean, $5-6 million return to consumers in 8 years. So it's been good from that standpoint. And I think Zanetta would probably say that, when you're just a reporter, when you're just doing GA work, you're kind of like the police. People always want to see you come and arrive at the scene. But when you're doing consumer work, it's like you wearing a cape. You like the fireman now. And so it's a completely different response that you get from people. And so that's been very rewarding, because now people aren't running from me all the time. They're actually embracing me. They're looking for me to show up. And it's a good feeling when you go home at night. I'm not talking to that mother whose kid's been murdered every night. Now I'm going home after saving somebody a couple $1,000. That makes that margarita taste that much better in the evening. So I can tell you there's a lot of joy, or a lot more joy, on this side of the world in terms of being able to put money back in people's pockets and right wrongs, and maybe even change some legislation for a larger group of people than there is just in day-to-day reporting. Even if you that lead A-block dude who's always leading and always breaking stories, you can get more joy out of doing it on this side.
I love that. We are definitely going to talk about some of the perks of being on the investigative side. And I know a little money, you talked about money. That's something as well. Let's jump to another gentleman who is big on getting results, Mr. Curtis Macleod, who helped me organize this panel. Just so you all know, I did not do this alone. This was a group project. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, your title, but then your why. Why did you get into doing this?
Thank you. And it's an honor to be here with, I guess, in the room where it happens with all these fabulous people. This is awesome. Like Madison said, Curtis Macleod, working down here at Spectrum in Orlando. And For me, it was a former job, kind of like Zanetta said, and hey, Zanetta again, me and Zanetta go way back. I have to tell a story a little bit about Zanetta. No, we go way back. No, honestly, when I was first starting in the business, I remember producing a noon show for Zanetta. And it taught me a valuable lesson, which I'll share later. One of the reasons why I thought it was key that she would be on this panel. But I'll just say that for me, it came from a coworker who told me, hey, look, you've got to get involved. You got to take your career to the next level. You're doing a great job. Kind of like Randy said, bringing in some great stories, top stories, but let's do a little bit more. Not saying that what you're doing isn't great, but let's take it to the next level. And I was at the point in my career, like, which path do I want to take? A fork in the road, if you will. I really wanted to do the anchor thing, but I just wanted to take the reporting a little bit more deeper. What else can I do? What else can I do to get answers for those people? Because I love that. I did one story and it yielded some results. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. We're changing people's lives. We're changing the way, with a way that the impact is a little bit different. So that's what I love about it. And I'm a type of person that I want my time too on my stories too. So those 1 minute 15 stories just weren't doing it for me. So I figured now, especially in the unit I'm in now, they give us time, and especially being at Spectrum, and Darlene can tell you we're on all the time. We just rotate on. So they got nothing but time. So I'm like, hey, can I do a 5-minute piece on something? They're like, oh, sure, we'll find somewhere for it. So for me, it was about being able to do more stories where I could have a little bit of a harder impact and just use the skills that I like to delve deep into those stories.
Perfect segue. Let's go to Miss Darlene now. Last but not least on our panel, we're going around saying where you work, but we're asking why. Why did you get into investigative work?
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be able to talk about this work. We need more of us in this space. It's incredibly important that we infiltrate investigative journalism. So thank you. So I happen to work at a station where when I first started, back in 2006, 2007, the focus was investigative journalism. And so we kind of were, we had that mindset at our station. So I was doing more like day turns at that time, like taking the big story and then making it into investigative. I left the station, came back, and when I came back, they wanted someone to focus on deeper dives, someone to dig in. And so I kind of had that foundation of what investigative looked like. And it really was about taking it to the next level and diving in deeper, getting more into the data and enterprising investigative type stories. And so I got into it because I ended up getting hired at a station where it was the focus on a day-to-day basis.
I love that. So I want to get right in because the number one question I get from so many of my mentees, people who look like us that are trying to get over to the I team, is how to do it. There are tons of GA positions open, but those investigative spots aren't quite there. So Randy, you did 25 years as a general assignment reporter before this position was created for you. So talk about how do you take that GA, A-block, breaking stories type of mindset and transition it into an investigative mindset if you're just a GA reporter?
Well, I mean, what I would say is first, it's a proven business. So, I was turning investigative stories even as a general assignment person because I was breaking my own stories. And so in order to stay out in front, they would turn into series. Sometimes I would follow those same subjects over the course of a year, come back a year later and say, hey, I have a great follow-up on something. So I think, organically, you can look at news directors are not turning down investigative pieces. You can look for time. You just have to present your case. It's really all in the pitch. If you want to get more, if you want to be part of an I team, or if you want to be part of an investigative unit, you have to start pitching those kinds of stories and seek out the time to do it. Now, some of that might just be shoe leather. You might have to do it on your own time. You might have to put in some sweat equity. But once you show results, then they're going to want that work because it's all to their benefit. It's what they have to market. It's what they will build ads and proof of performance ads on and slap on digital and try to get more clicks off. They'll try to drive things towards what you're doing. But I would suggest that if you are a GA reporter right now, start looking for those stories that you can build. And first of all, make sure that you're staying competitive on a daily basis. Again, I was trying to lead, I was disappointed if I didn't lead our newscast. If I wasn't the lead A-block story, I was pissed off. I was having a bad day as far as I was concerned. Even if I felt like, okay, maybe my story is the lead, but it's still the best story in the market today. So you have to push yourself, I mean, for greatness, and then it'll be recognized. I mean, that's what's undeniable about this business. If you're pushing yourself, it'll be seen. If you're not pushing yourself, you'll just be another person on TV. But if you're pushing yourself, there's no market that you can't crack. I don't look like the brother that's supposed to be in LA. I'm not that dude. I don't have hair. I'm a darker hue. I'm built like a linebacker. I'm not like a lot of brothers that would be in this market, which is a pretty market full of celebrities. But I'm a name quantity now in 8 years, which is, hard to do in a city full of stars. So I would just say, keep pushing yourself, but drive yourself for those A-block stories that have legs. If you have a story that has legs that you can win over the course of maybe a week or a month, you'll start to show your news directors that you're worthy of digging in on larger stories. And that gives you your foot in the door.
And Randy, you touched on something, and I saw Darlene, you nodding your head, time. That's a big trigger word for a lot of journalists, especially producers. How, everybody, we might just go round robin on this. But Darlene, I know you do a lot of longer form pieces. So what do you have to do to, as I say, earn your time?
Sorry, I was trying to get my husband to get my 2-year-old very quickly before I unmute it. I think that it's about earning it. All of the things that Randy just said, that's how you get the time. If you're doing great work on a day-to-day basis, and even if your investigations, if you're putting in the work and the reporting beforehand, then when you go to your producer, your executive producer, or even your news director, chances are they're not going to have a problem with giving you the time. But I can tell you that it didn't happen for me overnight. Some of the stories that I do now on the air, they're 4 minutes, 5 minutes long in our primary newscast. That wasn't happening in 2012 or even 3 or 4 years ago when I was doing investigations. What had to happen was I had to put in the time on my own time to do the extra research, to get the extra data. And I want to piggyback off something that Randy said, and this may rub people the wrong way, but I think it's important to note, you have to be willing to do this work on your own time. That's the bottom line. We've got to get back to, hitting the street, pounding the pavement, and being willing to put in the time before and after work. I hear a lot of reporters say, well, that's my personal time, or that's my free time. Well, all of the stories that I've gotten the extra time for on air have happened because I have put in the extra time off air.
And Curtis, I'd love if you could expand upon that, because especially with some of the younger, my mentees are the ones that are coming out of college now, and they're starting or they're in their first market, and they feel it's very unfair to be asked to do this on your own time when you're barely getting paid to be working on the company's time. So what do you say to those younger journalists? Because all of us agree, yeah, I got there because I did some work when I wasn't working.
I'd say the same thing, kind of echoing Darlene's sentiments. I mean, a lot of people will argue and say, well, it's my time, I need to do my own thing. But especially in the very beginning, and when you're trying to buy your time on air, you really need to put in that work, because it's about trust. It's about, can I really trust this person to give them all this time? Is it going to be quality journalism, quality work? We've all been there, all of us now in our careers, where we stayed late and came in early, and you had to do that now. And I know several of us here, you got kids and everything now, but there are times I struggle with work-life balance sometimes, even now. I was in Tallahassee for a week, and my wife was looking at me like, if you don't come home and get me, like, I'm telling you. So there are things that you have to do. Luckily, she was a reporter for about 10 years too, so she gets it sometimes, but that don't mean anything. But so you have to make sure, I think, for those young people, that the reward is there, but you have to be willing to put in the time. It may seem like, oh, I got, I need, and we're not talking about something when you need a mental break. We understand that. But I think that to get the reward in the end, it's about putting in that time. It's about going the extra mile. Because for me, if I want the story to look good and my name is on it, I'm going to stay forever, how long it takes. I'm going to come in early. You don't have to ask me to. I will be there. Yes, my off day. Get me on the back end. I don't get overtime. I'm salary. So get me on the back end. Give me my day later. That's what you have to do if you want to win. I tell my son, my 4-year-old, every day, 1, 2, 3, carpe diem. If you want to seize the day, you have to take advantage of the moment. That's the only way you're going to win. So I say that to everyone else, especially the journalists who are starting off in that market. When I was in Columbus, Georgia, making $25,000 a year, there were some times I was like, well, I really want to be at home. I was living at home too, in my hometown. They were throwing barbecues, everything. Mom and them was like, hey, come on over here. I was at that station. So that's what you got to do.
It is a lot of groundwork. And I think as the industry changes, we see journalists being less willing to do that. But I think that's a big purpose. And you see a lot of seasoned investigators on here. There's a lot of work that was put in. Zanetta, I want to come to you. This is a question that actually came in prior to our panel. There are a lot of journalists who are in newsrooms that either don't have I teams or they don't have openings on those I teams. So many journalists are wondering, can you still be an investigator if you're not over on this team? And how can you find those stories and flip them and morph them into investigations?
Sure. So I like to tell everybody, you don't have to have investigator in your title to do investigative work, period. So the first thing I like to start with is be the type of reporter that has a watchdog state of mind. We talked about it a minute ago. I think Randy mentioned it. A news director loves story that has legs. So let's just start with the basic thing. I'm in Memphis. It's a breaking news market, right? Well, what was the big story today? Okay, you take a step back from that. Every reporter, even if they don't know that they want to become an investigative reporter down the road, may think of things the next day. Oh, we should talk to this person. Oh, we should talk to that person. So you're already thinking about that. Well, let's take that a step further. I always say to people, if it's a person, if it's a business, if it's an entity, everybody's got a boss. I used a term at a conference earlier this summer, who's the boss, the old TV show. I know it's lame, but it's easy to think of. It means if it's a particular group, maybe there's a regulatory board. If it's a person, who do they report to? I always start there. That's where records go. That's when you start filing open records requests. Some of those may be a quick term. Some of those may be the type of things you have to wait on and you have a story down the road. But the point is, you started with something that maybe your station is already working on. Then you take a step back from that. What else do viewers want to know? What else am I interested in? And you start to ask yourself those questions. And then you can easily build upon what would become an investigation. And so there you go right there, whether it's the next day, the next week, the next month down the road, you've built up investigations based on this story. And who knows where that can take you. That's where the work starts. Again, just having that watchdog state of mind. Every time looking at it from that perspective of what's the next step? Where do I go from here? Why did this fail? Who let it fail? And that's how you get those answers. We're talking about, shining the light on the problems, holding the powerful accountable. That's how you do it. You're finding that information, but it all starts from that one point. It's just asking yourself those questions. We always kind of joke about, the wheels are constantly turning. Right. But that's where it starts. That's how you start digging.
And I love that you said you don't have to have investigator in your title to do that kind of work. So Randy, I want to ask you then about marketing. Like, tell us more about, what do you mean this position was created for you? How, if you are titled a general assignment reporter, can you market yourself as an investigator?
Well, again, I think it comes down to the work. And just to sort of put a cap on what everybody's been saying, you got to feed your own curiosity. If you're not curious, then you're not a reporter. If you're not going to feed that curiosity, I don't know what you're doing. Don't go do something else if you're not going to feed your curiosity on a daily basis. And if you aren't competitive and don't want to win, go do something else. It's a competitive business. We get grades every day. We get our work is on display for the public every day. So if you don't like to be competitive about it, if you can accept losing easily, go do something else. This is not for you. If you do have that sort of dog in you and you are competitive and you do feed your curiosity, this is exactly where you want to be. Now, in terms of marketing, I didn't really have to market myself. I had a body of work, but in terms of what's being done in terms of marketing me here in Los Angeles, again, within 2 years, I was showing up in station research. So if you don't know what station research is, that's what they send out and they try to collect to see who's popular on a station. You don't come to Los Angeles and show up in station research in 2 years, unless one, you've been putting in the work, and two, they've been building you up in branding. And so that's what you get as part of the I team. In fact, within the I team, I'm a brand of my own. It's called Max Got Your Back. And so, or Randy Responds. And so within the I team, I have my own brand. I have my own ads. I have my own commercials. When I do a story that helps someone, there's a proof of performance that goes on immediately. I have things that nobody else has as part of this staff as being a specialty franchise reporter. In fact, right now, look at what I have. I have my own office. I don't know where y'all at. Do y'all have your own?
Not him showing off the office.
You gotta come see me, you know. And so again, when we talk about specialized reporting and I team and doing work and things like that, there are different sides to this job. We know that the white dude with brown hair is going to get that anchor position. He may not be the most charismatic. He may not be the swaggiest person. He may not even have a great delivery, but he's going to get that anchor position. If nobody sees you as an anchor, how do you see yourself? And how can you maximize your own earnings? How can you build your own brand? How can you have the career that you want, that sets the hours that you want, does the work that you want, gives you what you want to be able to do within the newsroom, and still gives you a high profile in the community if you're not going to ever get in that anchor chair because somebody else doesn't see you that way, you know? So you have to start thinking about how you build that regardless. And so I think that how do you see yourself? Yeah. Do you see yourself worthy of more branding? Do you see yourself worthy of more marketing? Are you upset that the story that you wrote didn't get promo? Well, guess what? That's what happens when you're on an investigative team. They're going to make sure that people hear about the work that you put in and put on the air. And I think that that's a huge, huge aspect. And it pays because, again, once you're part of station research, it makes it a lot more difficult for somebody to part ways with you when the viewers are the ones who say you're a reason that they watch. And so that's a huge, huge factor. It starts to let you know what your worth is and your value is to a station. And that's something you really never get as a general assignment reporter.
And I love what you said about body of work. I'm so glad President Tucker popped back up here because I was getting ready to call you out anyway. I remember having a conversation when I left my last market about, you know, I'm going to say I'm an investigative reporter. And she was like, well, maybe you should work on this, this, and this first. So she is tough. I'm going to tell you that right now. But tell me then, like, let's have a conversation with the public. Like, when can somebody, Randy said body of work, when can I say, I'm an investigative journalist. I've done these investigative stories and I want a full-time investigative job. You're on mute.
Because my computer automatically jumps to mute. One of the things, I mean, yes, you can call yourself an investigative reporter. You know, anybody can put the title up there, but it is something that you really want to make sure that you are fulfilling that role, you know, and that's the only thing that I was saying to you. I mean, I'm just pushing you is pretty much, you know, what I wanted to make sure that I was doing, because I think that it's important for us to be in those I teams so that we can get the stories. You know, I mean, there is so much that is wrong, so much wrongdoing, you know, so much corruption. And unfortunately, in many cities, especially when you're talking about urban cities, it is the Black community that ends up suffering. You know, it's the Black community that's being hurt. And what I have found when I look around the country and then when I look before, you know, in the stories that are done in markets, either those stories that could probably benefit the Black community get ignored because there is no voice on that investigative team to say, hey, we should look at that, you know, or those stories are not done in the most accurate, the most balanced, the best way. So, you know, if you are in this industry, to make sure that you are being an advocate journalist, then being in the I team really gives you that opportunity, because you're going to get that phone call. You know, we feel comfortable with people who look like us, just like everybody does. So, you know, I get calls from you know, people in the Black community, and they just want to talk to me. And they probably didn't call the other investigative reporter because they felt like, I will understand a little bit more. I will dig a little bit deeper, and I will make sure that I tell their story in a way that reflects them in the best light, and that I also you know, make sure that they are taken care of at the end of the day. So, you know, I am able to, like Randy, drink some sweet margaritas, because I know that I have made somebody's life better. And I also know at the end of the day that I have probably done something good for the Black community.
Right. And I see some audience questions coming in. Thank you. Please continue to put those in that Q&A. We are going to get around to them. But Randy brought up something that I really wanted to touch on, which were some of the perks. The office sold me. Like, I got to keep going because I'm going to need me an office one day. I need to close my door. But Curtis, talk to me about some of the other things that are perks, because I think especially in the industry today where we're fighting for money, for salary, for all these other kinds of things, there's really only two directions. That's at the desk anchoring or specialty reporting.
Well, I think one of the things, or at least for me, and I've seen Darlene and Zanetta, Randy, I know you guys are probably taking advantage of these too. My company, you're in the investigative unit, you get first dibs on all the conventions. So usually if it's IRE, NABJ, they'll pay for you to go to a lot of that stuff, especially because it's considered on-the-job training. So you get those perks. Like I mentioned with us, usually my stories are the longer ones. One, because, investigative story, and not just because I want it to be long, the story has to warrant that. Let me make that disclaimer on there clear. If it's not worthy of being 3 to 4 minutes, it won't be. I think too, I came in the door with some anchor experience. So I did get a lot of fill-in opportunities. Recently got promoted to weekend morning anchor. But let me say this, and Darlene, and I know Zanetta too, both anchors as well. You have to be able to balance it and can still turn the bread and butter. Just because you're on that desk, that doesn't mean that's going to give you a pass not to turn those stories, because they're still going to be like, hey, yeah, I know you're anchoring these shows, but you still need to make sure you got these stories done. So I think that goes back to that balance that we need. So there are some things, there are some opportunities, I think. And I know people always ask the questions about salary. I don't know enough about what my colleagues make, but I will say that the position I'm in now is probably the highest I've ever been paid. I'll say that much. I think that's fair for me to say. And as an investigator, and as they sold to me, well, this is an investigative job, so that's how it works. So there is that to be said. And you command, I think, your salary, you command your worth through your work. If you do the work, the money will come. But the key thing there is you have to do the work. And I'm not talking about just grabbing some stories here and there and, oh, low-hanging fruit, investigative story. Yay, I've done it. No, my news director used to work at a market. I think it was WSB in Atlanta. She ran the investigative unit there for years. And so she is tough as nails. And there's a lot of stories we can't do. Because she's like, wait a minute, this needs to pass a certain threshold. And if it doesn't pass that threshold, it's not getting on the air. It's been 2 stories I've spent so much time. We shot interviews. We did everything. I thought I had done my work. She looked at me. She goes, you know what? I like what you've done. I'm sorry you wasted 2 days doing this, but we're not doing this story. So that challenged me to, make sure when I come back with another story to make sure it's even better. So those are the things that you need to make sure that you have in line. And the accolades, the perks on the job, the money, it will follow you. If you can do the job, like Randy said, you've got to build that brand. Take your time and get there. All that stuff will come.
And that brings up a good point. I might have skipped ahead to once you're there, but let's talk about what kinds of things you need to actually be a successful investigative journalist, other than just a mind for deeper dive stories. So when you come in, how did you, Darlene, I want to ask you this question, learn these skill sets? How did you learn about accessing court records or databases, things like that most investigative journalists use as a day-to-day in terms of their toolbox?
So first, I'll piggyback off what Curtis said briefly. So I want to talk about this because I do think that sometimes we're too protective about salary information. If we don't share this, we can't help each other, and we can't make sure that there is equity in this industry for us. And so I will share a very quick story with you all. So my contract ended with my current station, and at the risk of some of my coworkers being on this call, I will share this. But when they came to me with my offer, it was laughable. In the last year, I had produced some of the best, I would say the best work that I've done in my entire career. And so that needed to be compensated. Whatever that looked like, that needed to be compensated. And so I will say to you all that make sure you are commanding your worth. And that comes with building that equity of doing the work. And so the office that Randy has, he didn't get that overnight. He earned that. The fact that, my company pays for me to go to conferences, I earned that. And guess what? When I go to those conferences, I'm going to bring back greater content, and the pressure is on me. It's self-induced. Today, I did one of those low-hanging fruit stories that Curtis talked about. When I finished my live shot, I felt vomit in my mouth because I was sick that I had to do that low-hanging fruit story, because in my view, what I put on TV, when I'm on TV, it needs to be excellent. And that's the mindset that you have to have if you want to be in this investigative journalist space, especially if you look like us, because you can't do subpar work. So to answer—
you so much work fighting for others though, Darlene. How do you have that conversation? How do you say this is a joke and here's my work and here's what I'm worth?
Well, so you mean in terms of salary?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So I think you have to have the built-in equity. You can't just command a salary and you've been doing low-hanging fruit for the term of your contract. You have to put in the equity that shows them, like Randy said, if you're not popping up in research at your station, then there's a problem. That means that there's no investment there for them. There's no reason for them to invest in you. And so you need to make sure that you're doing stories, that you're out in the communities, socially, but also community service wise, to make sure that you are popping up in research and that people know your name. We have had reporters who look like me, have my same skin complexion, and they go into the Black neighborhood and they'll say, hey, do you know Darlene? I am a household name in our community. And I don't say that to brag. I say that very humbly. But you have to get to that point. And so that's when you go into the office, when they come to you with a contract and they say, oh, you need to accept this because this is all the company is allowing. And you say, that's cute, but guess what? I don't have to accept this. You've built up that equity. And it may not always be a financial increase that you'll get. There are other things that we need to start thinking about when we're negotiating these contracts and we get in this investigative space. Maybe there is a community organization that you want to be a part of that has a really hefty fee to join. Maybe that's something that you negotiate in your contract. Being in the community and being connected with people in the community is a really important part of this job. There are people in this community who will only do stories with Darlene Jones. That matters. I had a coworker who came to my desk the other day or a few weeks ago, and she said, man, you really got so-and-so on lock. I called them, I found this lawsuit they filed, and they were like, oh, I only answered the phone because I thought it was Darlene Jones. That's the sort of equity that you have to build up. And when you have that, then you can negotiate those things. Very quickly, I will just answer your question about what it takes to get in this space. The biggest thing that I tell people who are entering into this space is that you have to be organized. When you're an investigative reporter, you're juggling multiple stories at one time. And you have to be able to pick up the ball when it's thrown to you on any given story. So I'm working on a low-hanging fruit story today, but I got 3 or 4 phone calls about stories that I'm trying to juggle for the May book. And you got to be able to be organized. So I encourage everybody to have a spreadsheet and a folder for every single story that they do. I think that's step number 1.
And Zanetta, I wonder if you can give us a few extra steps here. A couple questions keep coming in about some of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis that even when I stepped into investigative reporting, I was like, oh no, I should know how to file a Freedom of Information Act request already, right? Or I should know how to access these databases. What do you tell people about where and how to learn those kinds of things we need to even get to the organization stage?
So 1, don't be afraid to not know something. Let me start with that. I know as reporters, we often, it's your job to know and to tell and to share and all of that, but it's okay not to know. And because every state is different, every municipality is different, sometimes you're starting all over. So 1, local governments, if it's for example, your city, right? Here, I mentioned breaking news market. A lot of people, the general assignment reporters, even if they're not doing investigations, we work with them on how you look up somebody's criminal court record, right? But then a step further from that, they may learn how to, of course, get mugshots from the jail and then an affidavit. But I'll say, have you ever gone to look at the entire jacket? What else might you learn there? Well, here's where you go to do that. County court records, where I spent most of my time early on, especially with civil cases. A lot of people the past 2 years have talked and learned a lot about evictions, but probably my fellow consumer reporters here, if you've covered anything related to housings, evictions, poverty, you've kind of lived in those spaces. So your county court records, because of consumer stuff, we do a lot with state and federal. So usually your websites, starting with city, county government, then state government, all of your regulatory agencies. I mean, anything from a barber to a CPA has to have a license. So who are those licensing authorities? Right when we were getting started, my assistant news director was texting me about a breaking story they've been following about a care home. Well, it's a story that we'd done. It was related to a story that we'd done several years ago. She's like, how do I find some information super quickly? And I said, give me an hour, but let me look for another email. Well, within 5 minutes, I shot her a link and I said, start here. I believe this is the agency, but use the drop-down menu. That'll give you at least a start, and then we'll go from there. But it's just little things like that. I tend to, and Darlene mentioned being organized, same thing, folder for every story, spreadsheets, keep a call log, right? All those people that call you every day, yeah, some mean nothing, but some turn into stories. You can keep a paper call log. You can also keep it electronically. Scan your files. I label them, and at a certain point, if it's a working file, everything's going in there, even documents that my photog or someone might shoot later on, or things that may turn into graphic stuff like that. That helps me stay organized, but it really helps the project long term. But all of those things that I mentioned, whether it's county, city, state, or federal government, I bookmark all of those sites just so I have them at my fingertips. And again, it's just, you have to start somewhere, but that's a good sort of basic sort of thing. I start with the levels of government, and also advocacy groups. And someone else talked about this earlier. Your communities better than anyone else, right? We know our communities. You're covering those communities. Some of those folks, lean on those, get that information, you add that to your toolbox. Something else I want to mention really quickly. I always try to challenge myself every year, a couple of years, to learn something new. So like maybe at the beginning, it was Excel, or getting better with some of those open records requests or FOIAs, or tidying those things up. The past couple of years, it's been deepening my skills in data journalism. It could be something small. It doesn't have to be big, but just learning a new skill to add to my toolbox. And that's also helpful.
That is helpful.
Real quick,
Yes,
well,
sir.
real quick, I just wanted to follow up too, and you were spot on, Zanetta, with the data journalism and stuff. Data journalism, that is like a gold mine. You can find a bunch of stuff there. But I also want to piggyback a little bit what Darlene's saying, especially for people in markets and you're getting started like me. I got started, I think I mentioned a few years ago, about 6 years ago, delving into investigative reporting. But when I knew I was going to Orlando, and I met Darlene like years ago in 2013, she was already queen of the city then. But when I knew I was going to Orlando, I was like, oh my gosh, how do you? Our team is new. We're competing with Channel 6. We're two, Darlene and her team, and it's like something else. What do you do? I'm going to tell you, I follow everything they're doing. In a sense, like when I say I follow, I watch. You have got to be a connoisseur. That is the only way you're going to win too, is you've got to watch what they're doing. She has a story going on, a promo drops. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on there? And she's right. In this market, there are a lot of people. I've tried to find a story. I thought I was doing something. Oh, Darlene came 2 days ago. So I'm like, wait, what? But that doesn't have to stop you. You have to continue to keep going. You got to keep going. Find something else. Find another way to get in. But at the same time, like I'm saying, watch. A lot of people get in trouble when I meet so many people that say, oh, I don't watch what's going on at the competition, or I don't know what's going on. You don't have to watch every day. Nobody's saying you got to like give them views. But when it comes to other investigative teams, I'm all ears. I know what Darlene's doing. I know what Greg Fox is doing over at WESH, and I know what the team over at Six is doing. You've got to keep your eyes open to what's going on, because you'll think you got some good story and they did it like 2 weeks ago. So you've got to be mindful of that. And I just want to bring that up because a lot of people may say, oh yeah, you know, I'm trying to, and it's, yeah, you want to be focused on you and what you're doing, but you also want to be cognizant of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
You can also look at other markets. You know, I know when I was doing a lot of consumer stories, I literally would just Google and see what Randy was doing in LA. And I just, you know, steal some of that, because it probably applies. The same kinds of issues are happening around the country. You know, so there's another, there's an agency, actually not an agency, but it is a journalism site called Solutions Journalism. And what Solutions Journalism will do is they will aggregate stories from around the country, and they will put them on their site, and they will kind of pick a topic. You know, you could go in and you could Google climate stories, weather stories, and they will show you the 4 or 5 stories that have been done, you know, that deal with weather. You know, the advantage of that is the one thing that you always want to do in your investigative pieces, or almost in any story, to take it to the next level, is to see where else, in what city, have they found a solution. You know, there's a problem in your city. There is something that the city council is tackling, something that the state is tackling. Well, have they already solved it in another state, in another city? Have they already found a solution? You know, and that's something that with this particular nonprofit, you can Google Solutions Journalism and you can see if anyone else has done that story, and you will be able to take that information. The other thing to do is, if you are working on that story, you know, and it happens to be about, I don't know, voting booths, and, you know, are they going to tackle and change the way people vote and how they vote? Well, again, just do the Google search and see if there are other city councils that have dealt with this. Defund the police. It's been done it's been done before somewhere else. So that also kind of gives you an opportunity to take your day-to-day story to another level. And it says to your managers that you are thinking outside of the box, that you are expanding this story.
And I'll just add to that quickly that you all should also be raising your hand to judge awards, IRE awards, Emmy awards. Raise your hand to do that, because even though it's time consuming, not only do you get incredible story ideas, but you get to see how other people are doing it across the country. That, to be honest with you, outside of watching the competition in our local market, because they keep me on my toes, like Curtis keep me like, you know, him and Jerry Askin over at Channel 6. They make me nervous. But if you are not challenging yourself, even if you are at the top of your game in this investigative reporting space, then you are doing yourself a disservice. And one of the ways you can do that outside of watching the competition is by judging awards. And I can tell you that by judging the IRE awards this last cycle, a month and a half ago, I was the only Black judge. And there was some incredible reporting from our people, but the way that the judging happens, it's a panel decision. And so we've got to get in these spaces for those reasons as well.
And we have 10 minutes left, so please put any of your questions out here, but I'm gonna try to get to one more audience question. We talked about some of the perks of being investigators, and I know that the hardest thing about being in the GA sphere is finding pitches. And I reached this euphoric state once in my career where I finally worked my way up to the top, and then all the pitches were coming to me. I was sorting through what I wanted to do. Randy, you are definitely in that position where people are seeking your services. So how do you look at the stories? How do you prioritize? How do you decide what you want to do? And once you do that, what's your process?
For me, I mean, you know, and doing consumer stuff, sometimes I look out for need first. So say I have an elderly person who needs medication, you know, that's a critical need. They may not have a son or a daughter or a grandchild around who can help them. So I might prioritize them over another story because they're elderly and they need help right now. In terms of pitches and things of that nature, I've always tried to build myself an outer newsroom. So people talk about being sourced. I talk about having a newsroom, because a source is one thing, but having people out in the community looking for stories for you and working for you is an entirely different thing. I'm layered up like a Great Lakes winter when it comes to being, having an outer newsroom. So, if you're going to beat me, then you're going to have to be layered up. If I'm covering a courthouse, I'm not just going to have bailiffs. I'm going to have security. I'm going to have court clerks. I'm going to have their secretaries. I'm going to have judges. I'm going to have bail bondsmen who can run through a courthouse and get any document at any time. I'm going to have jailers. I'm going to have 911 dispatchers. If you're going to beat me on that story, you better be layered up. It ain't going to be enough for you to have a source. It's not going to be enough. So I really try to build an outer newsroom, and that exists in consumer too. So I have financial advisors. I have financial people. I have people who work in sales. I have people who work in scams. I have people who work in securities. I have tech people. I have a network of people who are also saying, hey, keep your eye on this, or hey, here's something you should think about. And then when I go through my list of complaints, I go, oh, okay, I've got viewers here who have this, and I've got experts over here who are saying this. Smash, I got me a story. Like yesterday, we had a smash and grab robbery. Some of you guys might have seen it. These guys went up with sledgehammers, busted through a jewelry store, stole millions of dollars of watches. Well, everybody else is covering the story and the drama of the crime. We're looking at the stolen car that they stole, because there's been a lot of stolen cars. And the impound fees for getting your stolen car out of impound is like insult to injury. And then the deductibles that you have to pay for the damage that these thieves did is also insult to injury, but you wind up having to pay for that twice as a victim. Not only is your car stolen, you've got to go through all these processes to get it out that cost you more money. Everybody else looks at that as a crime story. I look at it as a consumer story. So I start calling around to see what it's going to cost this individual to get their car back out of impound. What are the storage fees going to look like? What's the deductible going to look like? What are the damages to the vehicle? That's my consumer story. Yesterday's crime story is tomorrow's consumer story for me. And that's kind of how I think. And again, I'm layered up. So I've got tow yards that'll tell me what proper fees are. I've got some who might just release those because it's the nice and right thing to do, and others who charge you and then charge you storage fees. So I can explain that with some depth and do a bigger story on it, even though it was just sort of a run-of-the-mill smash and grab. Your smash and grab is my great consumer angle. That's kind of the thought process for me. And like I said, a lot of times after I build my outer newsroom, I can match viewers because I'm getting those complaints anyway. It's just a matter of matching all that stuff together and saying, okay, these are the stories. Prioritizing, it just depends. I usually start widest range. What affects the most people? But like I said, I'll prioritize an individual if I think that they need help right now, or if I think their situation is dire.
Do you have any sort of, and this could be for anybody on the panel, any apps, any tools, any resources that are your go-to or you must use in any kind of reporting?
I'm old, so I collect people. I don't know about everybody else, but honestly, that to me is the best way. Building trust with people and collecting people will get you all that data, even things that you don't know how to access. But there are apps and investigative toolkits out there that are helpful. But for me, it's still about collecting people. On a daily, hourly basis.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are interested in how to reach all of you. I think our webinar team is going to be able to put in the chat everyone's Twitter handles and their email. Oh, look at that. Oh, I said it and it appeared right in the chat. Everyone's contact information. Someone asked about mentorship. My recommendation would be the email. Who did you connect with? Shoot them an email. See if you can talk to them, set up a conversation. For our last question, this is one that I want. I'm going to start with Dorothy because it's answering questions. Someone said, what did you say to me? What'd you say to that poor girl when she wanted to be an investigator? And it was some of the best feedback I ever got, because what I didn't realize about transitioning was my writing. I tell people I'm a hell of a reporter. I can go out there, like Randy said, top of the A block. I can do the protest reporting. But when it came to investigations, what Dorothy said, she was like, all your investigations are reports. Where is the story? Where are the characters? How are you getting me interested? How are you making me relate to this? So can you just talk more about some of the writing in terms of transition? And then Darlene, I'm also looking at you because you do long form, like what I'm doing now. And I would have swore I lied on my resume when I told them I could tell a story, because what I'm doing now is nothing I've ever learned before.
Yeah, so the thing about writing long form is that you want to hold the audience. And when Madison and I talked about storytelling, I liken it to a movie. When you go to movies, you watch the movie, and every 15 minutes, something blows up, And so just as you're sitting there, all of a sudden, you're going, whoa, you're going, wow, you're going, what for? Well, that's the same way you tell a story. You get that character, and then as you weave the audience through that, you do a reveal, so you save something. You don't build it linear. You build it in a way that says, and then, and now what? And then you put some more information in there, you put some data in there, and then you come back and you say, and you'll never believe this. And here's what happened next, so that way, if somebody is sitting at home watching it, they may be otherwise occupied, but then when you say, in everything I just said, you won't remember it when I tell you what happened next. And then you go on. So, that's what I was telling Madison. She's got everything down there. Now it's time to make sure that you are able to put together a story that doesn't necessarily have a beginning, a middle, and end, but has 3 or 4 PowerPoints that will make you remember the story and make you pay attention.
Darlene, anything?
One of the things I love about having more time to do these longer form stories is that you have time. That means you don't have to do an interview with the first person who says, yes, I'll do an interview with you. It also means that if you do an interview with the person you think is the right fit, and then a week later, 2 weeks later, you find somebody else, you can substitute them out. That just happened with the story that of mine that aired in February. I thought I had all the perfect characters, and then I actually went to interview one of those characters, and an even better character showed up when I was there at the jail. And I will tell you that when people see me now, over the last several weeks, when people see me, they're like, can you tell me more about that lady you interviewed? She was a memorable moment. Mm-hmm. And so don't be afraid to ditch the interview that it took you a month to secure, or to wait on that interview that it's going to be the perfect character, because storytelling is about the characters. And I'll leave you with this analogy. When we do our ponytails, and we used to have like the balloon ponytails where you like have a big circle and then you have a line and then you have another big circle. Like, that's kind of how I envision my stories, like these balloon moments of like, okay, what's going to be the pop, that gets people back to the TV if they're cooking dinner or fumbling with the kids or whatever. So
I love that.
And I'll just say there are moments too where, and I'm sure Zanetta's had to do this, there are moments where you're not so much storytelling, around a character, but you're storytelling around information. Because in consumer, we wind up having to do a lot of different financial things that just have to make sense to people. And you can't necessarily build that out of one person's circumstance. Everybody needs to know what the child tax credit is. Everybody needs to know how the markets are collapsing or rising and falling. And so sometimes your expertise is tapped to make sense of what doesn't make sense. And that's not always built around a character. Sometimes you just have to do the math on a board for people so that they understand it and get it. And that's when your own talents of storytelling come into play beyond building a story around a character and letting that character carry it. You better be able to carry that on TV, because now your station is turning to you for expertise in this particular area.
Ooh, you just said math to a bunch of journalists. You saw my whole body just like jump right there. Ooh. Anyway.
I'm sure Zanetta can attest. I'm sure, Kurt, if you do a consumer, then you better know something about markets and finance and dollars and cents and be able to make that make sense quickly, because you never know when you're going to wake up and all of a sudden the stock market has gone haywire, or gas prices are now at $6 a gallon, and that just needs to be explained to people.
Well, with that, it is just past 8. I told our webinar team I would be on time and on schedule. There were so many questions from our audience about skill set. This was really an introduction. How do you get over to investigations? What is it like? But like President Tucker said, we are really working. We're hearing you all saying that you want more content surrounding investigations. So we're collecting all those questions and trying to figure out what we can do for you next, what the next webinar could be. And based on the responses, maybe it'll be on tools and skills and things like that. I want to thank you all of our panelists, all over the country. It was so hard to nail down these pros, but they did it. They committed this time. Just want to say thank you for joining us. And of course, follow NABJ on Twitter. Hotels, book your hotels. It opened today, and we will see you all in Vegas.
Thank you.